Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Show, the draft show with the highest ceiling. I'm your host, Bryce Hendricks, joined as always by the great Cooper Klein and the wonderful Stone Hansen. And this is it might not actually end up being like our penultimate episode. I don't know how Coop is going to do the releasing on these, but what basically feels like our penultimate episode, it's this, and then it's the mock draft, and then we will feel done, even if we might not technically be done in your guys' feeds. But this is what it's all about. At a certain point, I had to really to peel back the curtain before we get to talking about things. And I had this interesting talk with someone that works in the NBA, and I was kind of saying, like, I hate how much I get judged by my big board. Like, I feel like I put all this work into scouting and evaluating and having like nuanced opinions on guys, and then my so much of that gets whittled down to, well, where did you have them? Even if I was completely right on someone, if I had them too low, that's still in it, right? Like if I was right on everything about who they were, what their game was, what their upside and downside was, I could be completely right in my evaluation. If I was too low, I get judged for being too low numerically. He was like, yeah, but where would you draft them? And to me, that was like a really simple way of phrasing. As much as we love everything else we do, and as much as I do personally hate big boards, like legit, like I'm not joking about that. I hate big boards. I hate seeing other people's big boards. I hate my own big board. I don't like big boards. At a certain point, this is what it comes down to. Where would you draft them? That's what the draft is. The sad truth of it, all that nuance doesn't matter if you're at 6 and the best guy in the draft goes at 7 and you didn't take him. So that's my little spiel, preamble, whatever you want to say. Coop, Stone, my friends, I'm very excited to be here with you guys. How you guys
doing? Happy that we're finally at this point. It's going to be, I think, a good discussion, and this will hopefully, as we're recording this, my board releases tomorrow, and this will be the nice, perfect finalization, completely, set in stone, if you will, the numerical value of these guys. So. I'm looking forward to this discussion, and I think it'll provide clarity to hopefully not just myself, but people watching and listening as well.
I'm ready to start swinging. I know you said you're excited. I'm ready to start fighting you guys. Put up some verbal sparring. Let's get into this. I'm ready to duke it out. I'm ready to call Stone the meanest things I've ever said in my life on this podcast for how he feels about Derek Queen. So I'm ready whenever you guys are. I'm feeling good.
Absolutely. Let's just jump right into it. And the place to start here is at 1-1. Listen, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. We all have Cooper Flagg at 1. My question for you guys, is he in a tier of his own? And if so, why? Whoever wants to go first.
Are we going to spar? Are we starting with spar?
No. Yeah, he's a tier of his own. I think he's pretty close to generational as far as number one prospects go. I have been slowly over the years perfecting my board, tinkering with it, keeping the same kind of structure, the kind of, if generational is Wembanyama tier, then he's a half tier below him, right? I think he's in a tier of his own as compared to all the other guys we'll talk about today. But this is like the tier I would have had Cade in if my board looked like this at this point. I think just like so far head and shoulders above the playing field, but he's not like, I think to be truly generational, you have to have like something that is like so absurdly outlier about you that it's just like nobody can even question it. And Flagg, it's kind of his well-roundedness, but that doesn't really count. Flagg, it's like the inability to question any of his production in any of that. But that doesn't feel fair. So I have him a half tier below that and a tier above anybody else in this class.
Yeah, clearly 1-1 for me in this class. Not really close. And I would agree, probably a full tier separation, I would say, for me. And the only two guys I would have said are generational or as prospects are Luka and Wemby. And I think Cooper doesn't meet that for me. But he's, only a tier behind, and I would probably have him above Cade, but in that same tier. And I think these are franchise cornerstones at the least. Like, these are guys you're building your team around, and there's Typically, not many of those guys, and especially guys like this that are probably perennial All NBA players. So, yeah, I'm very comfortable having him at 1-1. So far, so good. We're all on the same page.
Yeah, this is an easy 1-1. I would agree with Coop that he's borderline generational. The way I've described it is he's probably not quite on like the Victor level, but I think he's probably above like the Paolo Cade level. I think I would put him in the tier of guys with like Zion Williamson, and then it starts going back to before I was doing evaluating, like Anthony Davis, arguably John Wall, all the way back to like Dwight Howard, whatever. Not at that top like LeBron, Wemby level of like the league has never seen this guy, but just about as close as you can get. And I do think it's important to just remember there has basically never been a freshman this young, this productive in college basketball. I think there's a lot of people who really try to nitpick his game. And listen, I'm not all like a stats guy. Like I like film. I love watching film. Most of the work I do is film work. But at a certain point, there's a pretty undeniable statistical resume for someone who spent most of his college basketball season as a 17-year-old. He's consistently gotten better. Does he do it in the way that is always the most aesthetically pleasing? No, he's not. He doesn't have the tween hezzy step backs some guys want, and he doesn't have the just get on top of the rim and dunk on everyone stuff that some other people want. But what he does do is just everything well. He has no holes in his game, and I think he is underrated just how good of a passer he is. Like it is under discussed that he is probably a top 5 or so passer at his size that I've ever seen in my life. And the stats back that up. A lot of his passes are super simple and super efficient. So I think they kind of get underrated. That he doesn't have the flash of like a Nikola Jokic or whatever, but he's a great fucking passer. He's a great defensive player. He has an all-time motor. I think this is a guy who can and should be a top 5 player in the league at some point in his career, with upside to be like an MVP, contender or winner, for times in his career. And also I think his game translates to the playoffs. So whatever. Now the fisticuffs can start. Coop, who do you have at 2, and are they in a tier of their own?
I have Derek Queen at 2. I don't know if you can tell by my name there. And they're not in a tier of their own. I have Bryce's number 2 guy at 3. I'll let him reveal that if you haven't already heard. But I think for me, Queen, I fought for him in this group, in the group chat, on the pod. I have been duking it out for Derek Queen day in and day out. To me, if you're going to, I haven't shut the fuck up about this all season, but special skills make stars. And Derek Queen is full of special skills. He's got outlier strength. He's got great touch. He's got good feel. He's huge. He will bowling ball you, and he can execute basically every single kind of play that you want a big man to execute. DHOs, he can screen. He can run a pick and roll as the ball handler. He can make quick passes out of the short roll. He can, drive downhill and make kickouts out of the post. He can get inside and bully ball if you get a mismatch. He can do every single thing you need a guy to do offensively. And I think that the defensive problems are far overstated. He's got great positioning, long arms. He's big, he's strong, and he's an elite rebounder. And, that's a truly outlier, truly valuable player. I think he's got a higher floor than people really want to talk about, because elite pick and roll bigs who can really pass are super rare. And if that's your floor, even as a bad defensive center, if that's your absolute floor, in my opinion, I think he's still a starting level offensive player with room to grow. He's a little older. There's athletic concerns, obviously, but you draft for special. And Queen has the second most special in the entire class, in my humble opinion. And I know you guys don't agree because you hate me personally, and it's all a personal issue and a moral failing of you guys to not have him there. But I'm very much a Derek Queen truther, which is surprising because a few years ago I would have hated him. So, Stone, where are you at? Who's your number 2 guy?
This is the most consensus my board probably has ever been. I'm going with Dylan Harper. That's probably the least controversial of this group, I would say. But
is he in a tier of his own for you, Stone?
No.
Okay. How many? So I want to ask. So Coop, you mentioned you have 2 guys in this tier at 2. So how many people do you have in this tier at around?
2.
This? Okay. I have 1 guy in this tier at 2. So I do find that a little bit interesting. Can I ask? Do you guys both have Con Knipple as the other guy in this tier?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to let you talk about Harper in a second, Stone, but I am quickly going to talk about Knipple. I strongly recommend you guys go back and listen to our podcast on him. I think that was my word on him. I think this is a star bet. I think this is a really high level, decision maker with the ball. I think he has really good feel as a finisher and as a driver. I think he has real upside as a pick and roll and handoff operator. I think he can shoot the fucking shit out of the ball. Excuse my language. There's holes. Obviously, he's not the traditional star bet in that he's not like he doesn't have like a crazy complex handle. He's not a crazy vertical athlete, but I think the strength is an elite athletic trait. I think the proprioception and pace and ability to manipulate with the handle is better than he gets credit for because he doesn't have like a crazy complex handle. And I just think he's a ruthlessly efficient decision maker who has a floor as like a quote unquote 3-and-D 2 guard because I think the defense is better than he gets credit for. And I also think that people talk about it really weird. Even people that are trying to defend him are like, "Oh, he's like a great team defender." It's like no, like I don't understand. Like people really do just see white. I think white guys kind of like thick, and they just think that's who he is. No, if anything, the worry is the off-ball defense because he can't cover ground. Like that's my number one concern about Con Knipple's translation to the NBA is that he might just be a horrendous off-ball defender, even though he makes some good decisions because he just can't cover ground. I actually think he's pretty damn good on the ball. Not like a lockdown guy or anything, but he's just strong. He has really good footwork. He controls where guys go. He doesn't have the length to contest like the elite pull-up shooters or anything, but I think he could be a 4, like a star level guy. He can be a plus defender, and I think he has a floor as like a pretty good, on-ball defender. Offensively, I just think there's real star upside here. I bet on special feel. Like Coop mentioned his special skill with Queen's advantage creation, which I respect him for. And we'll talk about where I have Queen in a second. For me, the special skill on this guy at 2 is just crazy high feel and understanding of the game, ability to execute in scramble situations as well as just run the offense. I think that he is just Con is just really a one-of-one kind of feel guy. And also, again, he was a freshman on like a generational team. We've seen guys like that sometimes go underrated because, oh man, well, he played with Cooper Flagg. So Cooper Flagg must have obviously been the guy. Boogie Cousins played with John Wall. There's plenty of examples of this type of thing. And I just really, really buy Con. So that's where I'm at. I have him in a tier of his own at 2. My next group of guys is a little bit lower. Do you guys have any pushback on me having him in a tier of his own? And then Stone, do you want to give us kind of the Harper sell?
Yeah, I don't have much pushback because I myself have flipped between Con and Harper at 2 and 3, so I completely understand having him at 2 when I myself have had him there for at times throughout the year. Yeah, I mean, it's the easiest, quickest explanation for why he's in that second tier for me and third on my board is the highest level of intersection and highest level of intersection of shooting and processing that I've ever seen. And I think that that intersection at that level is worth taking that high, especially in this class. So no qualms with having him that high. I would obviously would have Harper in that tier as well, though, which I do because I think that Harper is the easiest to see star bet outside of Flag for me in this class. And I think that the strength-based creation, I buy the shooting. I know people have a lot of questions about it. I think he's going to be a completely fine shooter, especially off the catch, but off the dribble. Like he can do it both. I think he's a really good passer. Not elite, but I think that it's good enough for the level of score that I think it can be as a strength-based creator. So when he's, in my opinion, like, maybe even outside of flag, if you want to put flag in this conversation, but like the best bet as a primary initiator in this class. And I think that for me has him this high. And defensively, there's concerns, but he has a great frame and great tools to improve the motor and actually be effective on that end, even if it always wasn't, at Rutgers. So for me, I don't see the the easiest superstar outcomes that a lot of people do, where he's so easy to see as this perennial all NBA point guard, where a lot of people I think do. He's not that for me, but obviously I share where the overall ranking of having him at number 2, and that's typically not the most Stone Hansen board. I'm pretty diverged a lot from a lot of people, but this year I'm going 1-2 chalk.
So my big pushback with Harper, one thing, the motor just kind of a mess, not super high effort, and I worry that for a guy whose whole sell is point guard, and he definitely has to be a point guard. His special skill that I don't super love is his downhill attacking. He can't create from a standstill. His handle is just, there's a lot of question marks for me. And I really worry that he's not a super high level shooter. He's a really good finisher and can get into the paint well with the screen. And he's really good at like snaking, getting into the paint, a lot of different stuff there. But I really worry that he's not, like, to me, why Queen is a better bet at an advantage creator is he can use a screen, yes, and he can create a better advantage. But if you just throw the ball to Queen in an ISO, he is creating an advantage or drawing a double or putting pressure on a defense. Harper cannot put pressure on the defense in an ISO situation. And that's just really limiting for super duper star end outcomes. He can't hunt mismatches in a very real way because he can't step back against bigger guys and he can't beat smaller guys and punish them in the post. So if that's your only path forward and you have this big of a red flag, I find it hard to put him over a guy like Khan, whose special is just so apparent. To me, the outlier shooting and processing is just so much more valuable than Harper's like fine downhill pressure. Right. And that's kind of my worry. Also that Khan is like a way better defender despite it, Khan gets questioned about the defense all the time, and Harper never does.
Yeah, no, so as I transition, so my next group of guys involves these two that you guys have Derek Queen and Dylan Harper, and I actually view them very similarly. I think both have a really high-end outcome that is intriguing. I kind of agree with Coop that I don't buy Harper as like a top-end superstar. He gets like these SGA comparisons and all this, like he's not that smooth. Like he doesn't have that number of counters in the mid range, and I think his top end outcomes look a whole lot more like the level of guy that like a Devin Booker is, right? Like he's different. He's more of a point guard, but like that caliber of guy where it's like, hey, he can be really good. He has it in him to be really good. But also I worry that Harper would be even less good than someone like Booker at fitting next to stars. I think, he tops out as more of like a 10 to 15 level guy, not like a top 5 guy. Like I do think while it's a much higher bar, like I think like Khan has like top 8 guy in the league potential in a way I don't see with Harper or really Queen. Queen I like. I really like Queen's advantage creation off the bounce. But I have very similar issues with both Queen and Harper. I wish they were better passers. I just don't think either are particularly high-level passers. Harper had really good passing stats this year, but I I think he is very tunnel visiony. I think he gets really locked into one thing at a time. He struggles to transition from thing to thing. And I also think his live dribble passing is kind of a step behind. There's some good stuff with Harper, and there's a reason I have him at 5. I think his improvement rate is pretty good. He's gotten better over the last couple of years. I think he does have like real pick and roll scoring upside. And I think that, I was maybe too harsh. Like, I do think there's a floor there of just like someone who contributes. Like, he just has like he's so big for a point guard. He's, long and strong. He's going to be able to get downhill. I'm with Stone where I don't think the shot is horrible. Like, it's going to take some surgery. He's going to have to really kind of get the low release out of it, but I think it can be fine. I think there's like, paths to him. Who he reminds me a lot of, like, as a prospect in terms of how he's discussed, is like D'Angelo Russell. And I see a lot of that kind of in his game where it's like, that's the type of player he is. He's a good player, but one who, when you're trying to win at the highest levels, like, I'm really concerned about what that looks like. So that's really my worry with Harper. With Queen, it's just he's old and he's not yet shooty, and he's not a great passer. I'm with Coop. Like, I think the defense is fine, especially as a 4. Like, I think he can move his feet fine. I think he's a great rebounder. Not a great help guy. He can kind of get lazy. I think the passing is okay, not great, but he is, like, legitimately, the way I heard it described best. I wish I could remember who tweeted this, but I think he's someone you got to guard with 2 people in the league, and that matters to me. Like that's really important. But I do have my concerns about his age, the level of passer he is right now. And if the shooting doesn't improve to the level I think it can, like, I think the touch is great. I think he will be a fine shooter, at least on low volume in the league. And then I think eventually it will transition to being a bigger and bigger part of his game. But I have my concerns. I think he has a lower floor than Harper, even though I probably prefer Queen's ceiling a little bit to Harper, just because I think it's harder to guard him because he's like a 4 or 5 versus, Harper being like a 1-2. Like, I do think that matters. So I probably lean Queen a little bit, but it's pretty close for me. So I kind of mentioned my 2 guys in that next year. Before I mentioned the last guy, who I actually right now have at 3, though I'm willing to be talked into either of Queen or Harper ahead of him. What's your guys' next tier look like? You've got through 3 for Coop. It's Queen, Con. For Stone, it's Harper, Con. How many people are in this next tier for you guys, and who are they? Coop, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, so I actually have a 2-person tier here. I have Harper in this one at 5, and just ahead of him, though I kind of swap between the 2 of them on the daily, I have Kasparas Yakonas. I think that's who Brycey Poo has at 3. Kasparas is weird. I actually didn't like him that much until we did our pod on him, and you guys kind of talked me into him, which was a really fun experience. I usually like to think of myself as an independent thinker, but you guys really talked me into him in a very real way. And I think just he is the passer who I kind of wish Harper was. And if Harper was like the level of passer Kasparas was, I think I'd have him much higher. Kasparas can really create advantages. He's really great at running the pick and roll. He can maintain his dribble in an ISO situation. He's, I think, a better shooter. I think he has better touch than Harper personally. And he tries. That's my big thing, and why I keep on coming back to, even if Harper is technically better, Yakonas just gives a shit and hustles. He works really hard. Even when he's like a worse athlete than Harper, he tries harder on defense. He makes more of an impact, and he is more of an effort player, and that matters to me because I don't really see either of them as super duper stars. And at that point, motor matters so much more if you're not going to be the number 1 guy for 100% certain on a team. Yakonas also has more different outcomes for me as a guy. I could see him as a first, second, or third option and still adding value. So, Stone, I'll throw it to you. Who are your guys in this tier, and how much do you love Yakonas?
We haven't diverged a crazy amount because I think apart from me having not Queen in my top 5, I think the rest of it is pretty aligned. I have Yakonas at 4 on my board. And this is really where that opens up on my board. It's sort of like the floodgates open here. This is for me a 11-person tier.
So this tier goes from 4 to, don't make me do math, 14.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to dive into all of those guys right now.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give the quick sell on Yakonas, because for me, after this tier it opens up. So Coop and I, it seems like, have a pretty strong top 5. We draw the distinction in a slightly different spot, but a strong top 5, and it's the same top 5 in some order: Flag, Con, Yakonas, Harper, Queen. My argument for Yakonas is that I think he's a legitimately really good pick and roll passer, even though he turned the ball over a shit ton this year. And he plays really hard. And I think he has special off the dribble shooting ability and upside, which is, in my opinion, I've kind of grown to think just as, and maybe at times at the highest levels, more valuable than rim pressure. And he also has already developed some feel for using that gravity as an off the dribble shooter to get downhill. I think the reason I really prefer him to Queen and Harper is that I think the ceiling is similar, like top 15 or so player. I think his ceiling is maybe a little lower than Queen and Harper, which is why I'm open to being talked, other guys, putting other guys above him. But I think the floor is pretty high with Yakonas. I think he could be an off-ball guy who's more of a secondary scorer, secondary creator, and shooter. He can, get on top of the rim and be an efficient finisher despite not being like a crazy vertical athlete. He just has a lot of moves in his bag. I think that defensively he can compete a little bit more, but there's also that upside that he could be a big point guard who can actually pass like a point guard. And that's like real value in the league right now. Small point, as much as we like to hang on to the outliers, the Darius Garlands and the Jalen Brunsons and guys like that, small point guards, it's a really high bar. The bigger your point guard can be, the easier constructing a team is on both ends of the floor. And I think that's the real sell with Yakonas for me, is I think he can be an actual point guard. And that is, there's worry there. He turned the ball over a lot. The handle is kind of loose and fumbly despite being really reactive and him having good explosion out of it. The stats this year are weird. I talked about this with both him and someone like Demon, who is way down my list. But he's someone who struggled some because the minutes load is just different in college versus European basketball. Right? You're playing more consistently. That's why I think he took a pretty big dip in the middle of the season, and then he kind of started to rise back up when it got important. And I do think that does matter to me. So I understand that I'm amongst the highest people on Yakonas, but I'm pretty high on him. Do you guys have any thoughts on him before we get into Stone's Gigantor tier?
No, I even though it's a big tier, I think I struggle the most with 4 and 5 as like the guys in there, and Yakonas is 4, being like maybe a half tier above the rest. But I don't know if I feel like making a half tier if it's not at the very top of my board. It's difficult justifying there, but and that's to say basically I feel very solidly, even though it's the same tier, that Yakonas is at the top of this tier for me, where I think that there's on and off ball equity, there's a lead initiator outcome, there's secondary guy who's really strong off the ball as a secondary playmaker, as a shooter. There's a lot of things there and outcomes there that I latch onto that I'm really comfortable having in my top 5. My top 5, even though it's tiered kind of weird, I feel very set in it. And Yakonas is there at 4.
Then who's your guy at 5? Who's your 5th guy there?
Murray Boyles.
Oh, you're a demon. You're
okay.
a spawn of Satan.
All right, let's talk about our next tier. So my next tier goes to 9, though I've considered making it go to 10. There's a guy that's really close on that barrier for me. Coop, how big is your next tier?
It's technically just one guy, who I have sitting there by himself but it's kind of okay.
Let's have this discussion.
Yeah.
Who's your next guy?
I have Rasher Fleming here at 6. This tier has been the tier that I have used as like, if he wasn't so damn old, I'd have him. I'd have him above, right? That's how I kind of felt about Dayron Holmes, Devin Carter, guys like Jalen Tyson, guys who are just they're just good. They're good at basketball, and to me, that's Fleming. Fleming can shoot the piss out of the ball. Doesn't take stupid middies. He can dunk. He can cut. I think he's got some funk. Gives him a little bit of extra upside. I know Stone will disagree with me because he's a hater, but he's a great athlete. He creates a lot of chaos. He gets out there. He grabs boards. He gets blocks. He steals. Like, he is the perfect modern 4, and he's 6'9" and legit bouncy. I think he can play some small ball 5 if that's something you really want to lean into, or he could play massive ball 3 because he could just shoot. And I think the handle, he just didn't really have to use it this season. He's got some fluidity. There's some closeout attacking stuff. I think he can shoot better than the numbers really suggest. A little bit older, but this is just a guy I really believe in. He was in a weird context, and so some of the stats are a bit weird, but it's so easy to see the NBA translation with this guy. And NBA teams, like, every single year, you get to the trade deadline, and there's 6 teams that are like, holy shit, we don't have a single NBA quality 4 on our entire roster. And we need to find somebody who can at least pretend to do this job. And Rasher Fleming can actually fucking do it and add real value. So I'm a huge Rasher guy. You guys can give me your pushback if you want, but I have him set there as just a little bit below the guys above.
For what it's worth, I do have Rasher in this tier. Stone. Do you have Rasher in your tier that goes 14 or no?
No, sir. It's
okay. Would you like to give some pushback here then?
I would. I think that for me, I don't buy Rasher being more than just a 3-and-D guy. Like, I think that he is a 3-and-D player, and it's not we'll get to a player that is in this tier for me that, like, defensively is just really, really special. And I don't think Rasher is that. And for me to consider having him this high, he would have to be. I think he's a good defender. I think he's a good shooter, but not elite at either of those things. And he's older. Like, I feel very confidently that Fleming is an NBA player. Like, it's just very easy to see. That's why he's in my top 20. But I think the high-end outcomes are not crazy high. Like, I don't think there's a ton of crazy value. And I don't think, even though if I think the floor and median outcome are pretty projectable, I don't think either of them are, like, one of your, on a good team, like one of your 5 best players. So I think that I fully acknowledge the value that he could provide to a team and probably is a playoff rotation player, but I also just don't think the ceiling there is worth having this high for me.
I think you're crazy, but I do understand where you're coming from, right? The numbers aren't great. There's moments on defense. He's, like, not as polished as you would like to see, but I also just think Fleming is just like a later bloomer and the kind of guy who I value a lot in particular. I think size plus the stuff he does is so much more valuable than just, like, what he adds in the box score. A guy who's legit his size and can do actual wing things, even if it's, like, just 3-and-D, which I think it's slightly more than that. He does it all actually well and isn't, like, faking it. He's not putting together the he's not like kind of how DeAndre Hunter is, right? Where DeAndre Hunter is 3-and-D, but he's not actually adding value with either one of those things because he's not a versatile at all shooter and he's not actually a useful defender in any real way. Fleming is a useful defender, if not a super advanced one, and a slightly more versatile shooter who can actually attack closeouts, in my opinion. So it makes him more valuable to me.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I like Fleming a lot. I mean, I have him at 8 on my board. Like I said, in this tier, I do think the pathways are fairly limited. Like I worry about the perimeter defense quite a bit. I think that he's at his best doing really simple cuts and he took a lot of pick and pop shots this year. I don't think that's necessarily like going to be like a gigantic part of his game or anything, but I think he can be a really good simple player with potential to be like one of the better shot blocking fours in the NBA. Like that's really where my belief in his upside comes from, is I think he can really block shots as a four, which is great. Like that's a huge thing I value. I think this is a playoff player. I understand Stone's point. I do think the upside is super limited. Like there's no all-star outcomes here, which, does make me feel a little weird in this tier. Like he has a tier higher than some guys that I can squint and see all-star outcomes for. But I do think this is a fine spot for him. So after having Rasher in a tier of his own, Coop, how many guys does your tier after that compose of?
So after Rasher, I have 4 guys in my late lottery guys tier, and these 4 guys, I have been changing their order basically every single day. So it's Trey Johnson, Adutiero, VJ Edgecomb, and Noah Asange in that tier. Bryce, how many of those guys match up with who you have here?
So Trey Johnson, Noah Asange, VJ Edgecomb, and who was the other one?
Adutiero.
Oh, okay. Interesting. 2 of our guys match up there. Stone, would you mind reading us your gigantic tier so we can get a sense for where you have this next group of guys?
Yeah, so at 4, I have Kasparis Yakonas, 5, Colin Murray Boyles, 6, VJ Edgecomb, 7, Ace Bailey, though I'm open to a lot of discussion on that one, 8, Carter Bryant, 9, Jeremiah Fears, 10, Thomas Sorber, 11, Derek Queen, 12, Asa Newell, 13, Kalman Malawach, and 14, Maxime Reynaud.
Very interesting. So I did not hear either of you say the name Walter Clayton Jr., which is who I have at 6. So I'll quickly give the brief sell here. Outside of my top 5, Clayton is the guy who I think has the highest star ceiling, because maybe I'm becoming overly off the dribble shooting pill, but I just think he is a insane, historically good off the dribble shooter, who also is a better driver than he gets credit for, because he was playing in kind of a weird scheme where there was very little spacing. He was playing with 2 non-shooting bigs basically all the time. I think that he's a clever handler. I think there's a floor here too of just someone who can, make shots. Like you probably can play him as like a Seth Curry type. Like I think he's that type of shooter. The low end Carson Edwards outcomes worry me a whole lot less. This is a guy I would take very, very highly, with the understanding and to the extent that I probably should pull a Coop and just put him in a tier of his own, because I don't think I would take any of these other guys. I would take any of these other guys above him that are in the same tier, but I also wouldn't put him in that tier above. He's just too old, for me to be that clear top 5 guy. But I really, really like the upside here. I think there's superstar upside in here. I think there's a world that he is like the second best player from this draft, as crazy as that sounds, while also buying that there is a floor here of like an NBA rotation player. Maybe that's too high. What's your guys' quick pushback on Clayton Jr.?
I'll let Stone give it because he's lower.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it's that he's a nuclear shooter, great secondary ball handler, that I think that in itself has a lot of value. I think outside of that, I have a lot of concerns with how he scores at the other 2 levels. I don't think that the passing is particularly high level to be an lead initiating type guy for this type of range that he would have to be for you to consider him up here. We got into it sort of with the episode we did on him, where I think he doesn't, as a smaller guard, I think you have to meet just these really high thresholds where even marginal differences really matter. And I personally don't think Walter Clayton meets those in order to be like a star level bet. But even without the star level bet, I still like him, which we'll get into later. He's still in my first round, but not this high.
Yeah, Bryce sold me on him as just a high level first round swing. Just that level of shot creation is pretty important. I worry that there's not enough there surrounding that, especially because the handle's not like point guard level in like a very real way. And when you're at his size, you have to add more. And he's not going to add defense. He's not going to add, a ton of playmaking. Not a ton. He's not a great driver. He's pretty solid for his like archetype of guy, but he's not incredible. So there's just a lot of worries. I have him as a first round guy. I think I have him at 12. So just outside of this tier, I like him. Bryce talked me up on him. So I still think you're crazy though.
All right, next we should probably talk about Trey Johnson because that is someone who is in Coop and I's tier here, but not in Stone's. I think the argument is really simple. This is arguably, in my opinion, the best wing shooter at this age we've seen. And that's without me having knowledge of like Ray Allen or Mike Miller as prospects, but at least in the time of synergy, he has about as solid shooting stats as you could possibly have for a person this age across the last couple of years. I think it's reminiscent of AJ Griffin, who obviously flamed out a little bit, but Trey has much more consistent mechanics than AJ. The worry is he doesn't do anything else, which I'm sure Stone will bring up time and time again. But I do think there is a lot of value to just being this level of shooter and being a real two-guard size as well. Like, is it enough to build a star career on? I'm not sure. But if this is 6'6" Buddy Hield, then he's going to have a great long career and he's going to make a shit ton of money. And I think he is a special shooter. He can shoot off movement. He can go right or left. He can take pull-ups. I think he was in a system at Texas where he had to do everything because they didn't have very many good players around him. And so it just led to him taking a lot of bad shots. I don't actually think his shot selection is that bad. It's just there wasn't a ton of choice. And again, at a certain point, I think pull-up shooting is a place to build value. I think he has way less potential to convert that into like rim attempts or playmaking attempts than Yakonas or even Walter Clayton, and that's why I'm lower on him than those two guys. But I do think it's a special skill. And at a certain point, I'm at this point where even though I acknowledge I think there is a pretty low floor here, I'll take some swings on special skills. So, Coop, do you have anything else to add on Trey? And then Stone, why do you not have Trey this high? Where do you have Trey and why isn't he this high?
If Trey had a little bit more to him, or I bought something else other than the shooting at a really high level, even then it's just 3-point shooting. He's not like a particularly good mid-range shooter. If I bought anything more than that, I'd be even higher on him. But at some point, nuclear production plus shot plus age plus in the hardest conference we've ever seen, that has to stand for something. And I do struggle with, Trey's play style. Is it really conducive, super high level winning? But at some point in the draft, you take the swing on this guy can shoot the leather off the ball. So, and I do think that there's lower level outcomes where he's a movement shooter, shooting specialist who can come off the bench and like a very real way. He still has development paths forward, even if he's not this like super high end shot creator. So, Stone, why do you hate him?
Yeah, I'm probably the lowest guy there is on Trey Johnson, and it's up to me to figure out why that is. Obviously, I think he's a really much like a severe negative at basically anything outside of shooting. I do think the passing is good. I think the passing is good though because he's really good at finding the bailout plays. Not because he's good at necessarily creating with the intent of creating. And I don't think he can create because I don't think he can really do much out of dribble moves because he has severe athleticism limitations exploding out of it. I don't think the finishing is very good. I think the defense is like amongst the worst in this class. I think there's so many negatives there that it really takes a lot to extrapolate value from a player that the threshold is super high for him to be a really good shooter. Because if he isn't, I think that's very quickly becomes a negative player in the NBA. And even if he hits those thresholds, I still am left questioning what are the high end like how valuable are those high end outcomes? And I don't really see them as super valuable. Like he's a great shooter, that's awesome. But if you're a negative in so many other areas, how much value really is that insane shooting? And I think that for me, I'm not comfortable taking him in the lottery, or spoiler alert, even in the first round. And I think that it really is. It's up to me to figure out why, but I don't see that the high value that people seem to that have him in the lottery. I don't see what that value is.
Yeah, I won't push back on you too much. I think I kind of gave the sell. I just think a special skill, especially in a draft like this, is worth taking a swing on pretty highly, even with the rest of the game being kind of questionable. Another guy that I think, just Coop and I have in this range that Stone is lower on is Noah Asange, and. Coop, I'm just kind of going to let you give. What's your sell on Asange? Stone, you can push back, and then I'll kind of give like a little wrap up on it.
Super high level athlete who can get downhill, great cutter, can finish just about anything, can get to the free throw line. Did that really, really well in a pretty mediocre foreign league. But I can't quit these kinds of guys who are just athletic, lanky forwards who I think he's a pretty solid defender. There's some rotation stuff there. Easy to see the NBA translation to the four. I have lowered on him over time. And I just worry that maybe he's not got like any perimeter skill set in like a very real way. And the handle's cool, but it's far more functional in transition. And he's kind of bum slaying as like a very elite athlete for his league. But he can create chaos. He can get stocks. He can get blocks. He can get out and he forces transition opportunities to happen. And I think he's the kind of transition player that could completely revolutionize a team's transition attack in a very real way. And if that's your floor plus pretty solid cutting and finishing and some event creation, I think that's a pretty solid floor. And with his level of athleticism, the ceiling is pretty high as well. So I can only get so low on him. I had him at like 6 for a little while, but I've slowly dropped on him a little by little.
Yeah, I think with Asange, I struggle with him, but I think it's a lot more, and not to say that he's only like there's some tangible aspects of his game, but I think there's a lot of theoretical aspects that is requiring more projection than people are thinking, and I think that has me a bit lower, and he's still a first round guy for me, but I think I don't think the defense is like at a great level yet. I think that he makes a lot of mistakes. He bites too much. The footwork isn't great. The shot is still a bit of a question. Like right now, he's a great transition player. Can make some plays away from the ball defensively. And then from there, it's a lot of projection that I understand. And he's a great mover. There's a lot of things there to like and feel good about, but I don't feel strongly enough in any of them to have me thinking he's a lotto bet. He's not far outside of it, but it's more projection than I'm comfortable taking this high.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just this is a guy who was really young and really productive. I thought he was the most impressive player on his U18 teams. I think that he runs the floor really well. I think he's just a really good transition player. with enough funk in other areas. I worry about the half-court game. I really do. And I worry that he's not like the elite defender I think some people are trying to sell him as. But he has a good sense for event creation. He just is so massive for someone who can move like he can. And I just think he's pretty good at basketball. And at his age, I think that does matter. Like there's just some at a certain point, like he finishes a lot around the rim. He has just pretty good touch and real funk. And maybe I'm too high on him. I don't know, but this is like this is a bet I'm willing to swing on, fairly highly. I actually think the more we talk about it, the more I kind of want to move him up even a little bit, because I just think the upside here is real. Like this is a really interesting transition player who can kind of be a devastating four defensively. The shot is a huge question. How much can he play with the ball? Those are huge questions because I don't think he can comfortably play the five in the NBA. So like I understand being low on him because of questions about fit. But again, like I think we're at a point where you should be taking swings on talent. And like, at 7 in this draft, I don't know that there's a ton more talented players. So that's kind of where I'm at. That rounds out my tier. Coop, your tier includes one person who I think you might be the highest on of anyone on Draft Twitter, maybe. Do you want to talk to us about Adutiero?
Yes, I do. I'm definitely not the highest on Draft Twitter on him. I know some absolute demons out there who are obsessed with Adutiero, his free throw drawing, and they're the reason why I have him lotto. So full ups to you guys. You know who you are, a Thiero gang. You're all insane, but this is a guy who is huge, elite athlete, and just draws a ton of free throws in a really hard league to play in. And I do think that he's got some really fun, tough shot making and like consistent offense stuff. And there's a world where the shot comes around to passable with more time and development. And yeah, he's a little older, but he can block shots. He can defend, just like an insane athlete waiting to be harnessed by an actually good coach. He's been playing for like a really poor developmental coach for all these years in Calipari. And I want to see him go to the NBA and have some of this stuff actually be utilized properly. So I really like him, and I've been talked into it by other people who really just love a lot of the micro skills and shot creation stuff and free throw drawing. So I know you guys hate him. I listened to your podcast. I edited it.
So for what it's worth, I've risen on Thiero, and I have him in my next tier at 14. So technically, I'd take him in the lottery. I think he's much more of like a comfortable first round, like mid first round swing for me in most drafts. But I also did say in that pod that I think of all the guys I have ranked in that area, and that includes guys like Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecomb, he maybe has the highest star upside, because at a certain point, strength-based finishing, crazy functional athleticism, and a willingness to just go hard downhill all the time, that's really interesting for a four. If he was better defensively, I'd be as high as you are. I really worry that the defense is not good enough for him to be the type of player he is and succeed. And so then that lowers the floor a lot. But the ceiling is really high, and I'm with you in a lot of ways on the upside there. So no, I think that's great. That does round out Coop's tier here, except for someone that you guys are both high on that I am a little bit lower on, and that's VJ Edgecomb. Stone, I still think you remain the highest of us on VJ. Why do you like him more than us? Why are you at least a little bit closer to consensus? Why are Coop and I being dumb idiots?
I wouldn't go that far yet. But
I shouldn't say Coop and I. My fault. Coop has him in this tier. I'm being a dumb idiot. But.
Okay, Coop, you're a smart genius. I think that the perimeter defense is pretty intriguing to me. Not where it is, but where it can be. He's an uber athlete. He's not Ant Edwards level quite as an athlete, but I don't think he's like that far away. He could be a devastating just rim pressure guy. The handle is the biggest concern for me, right? Like if this is his calling card being this slasher, this rim pressure guy, the handle needs to improve. I'm I'm not super confident it does, but I also think I buy the shot more than people. I think I feel pretty decent about it being serviceable. Like it might not be great, but I think it's not going to be like a massive liability while he's on the court. Um, there's there's star outcome for him, and for me, that's still worth having this high in this class. Like I think star outcome for him involves him being like this two-way guard / wing that can defend the point of attack really well, and be a constant rim pressure guy, even if the handle is just good enough just to get him there. The athleticism, I think, can really uh, give him some buoyancy, and the shooting, I think, is good enough to be able to reach those star outcomes. So it's the star bets in this class for me are very flawed. Like it's there's nobody that I feel super confident hitting those thresholds, but I, at least for VJ, think they still exist for him, even if the likelihood is lesser than a guy that I would prefer to take in this range for a star bet.
So my pushback on VJ is just that I think the handle is so far away, and I don't like the defense as much as everyone else. I think he's a fine shooter. I think the athleticism is great in transition, but he doesn't access it very well, like off the dribble in the half court consistently. Not that he can't, but it's just not like a thing he can consistently do. And I think that really hurts his finishing. Now I think the finishing will improve, but I just think he's kind of like an average to maybe even slightly undersized two guard, like who isn't much of a creator, and I think will probably be an inconsistent shooter. And I'm not as sold on the defense as everyone else. I think that's the thing I'm way lower on, is I'm just not as sold on the defense. Now, the truth is, I've been low on these really athletic guys defensively before, and they've proven me wrong. Like at a certain point in the NBA, and I think some of this is survivorship bias, but lots of times these guys just succeed because they figure out how to play defense because they're so athletic, and they realize, oh, maybe that's my only path to actually getting on the floor. I'd still have him, like I have him at 12 right now, and I'm pretty comfortable with that ranking. But I just worry that if the shot is lower than the level I think it is, he's going to really struggle. Stone, the other person you got to do some work to sell us on, you have Colin Murray Boyles at 5. What is the sell there? Why are you so high on CMB? And then Coop, I'll let you tear it apart if you want afterwards.
He's, I think one of, I mean, outside of Flag, maybe has the biggest outlier skill in this entire class with the strength. Like I think the strength is amongst the best we've ever seen. Like Zion levels of strength, where he's just insanely strong, can get whatever he wants around the rim despite being undersized. Like I think he can create for himself with that strength to a degree that is being undersold quite a bit, in my opinion. Defensively, I don't think he's this uber mobile guy, but I do think he's mobile enough to guard a lot of fours, and maybe some like slower threes and a lot of strength-based creators. Like he's technically sound and proficient enough to be able to, I think, hang with guys like your Lukas that aren't super quick but are really strong. I think that the strength allows him to really defend post-up super well against some of the best post-up players in the league. The wingspan is so good that it allows him to be, I think, a full-time 5, even if that's not what he's thrust into. Like I think he's capable of doing that. I think he's a really good passer, not like elite or anything, but for the out of position player that he is, like I think that you can run a lot of different things around him, and not that he's like a hub necessarily, but he can make a lot of these quick out of the post decisions. So I'm pretty in on him. I think he's super high field guy who can defend a lot of the best players in the NBA, where a lot of the best creation comes from, against these super strong post up or just strength based creators. And I think that is super valuable to me, even if and I think the scoring's being undersold. Like he's so strong that I think he can really create space against almost anybody in the league with the strength that he has. So I'm pretty in on Murray Boyles.
My big thing with Murray Boyles, this is getting back to our first episode on YouTube, actually, for the people who Remember that far back. My problem with Murray Boyles is that if he is actually so strong, why doesn't he actually score on anybody like at the same rate of a guy like Queen? In theory, he's awesome. In theory, he's throwing around his weight and doing all this stuff. He was getting killed by SEC defenses, man. And he's a great production guy. So much that production came when his team's down by 20 to a team that should barely make the tournament. Jesus Christ, these people, they're stomping around my house. I worry that he's a defense first prospect also who can't slide his feet. And as much as you say, he can guard the best players in the league, I don't think he has like the lateral athleticism to stick with like a Cade. I don't think that he's strong enough to, right? In theory, or maybe he can guard a Tatum, but he's not laterally quick enough to stick with a guy like Tatum, or Tatum will just pull up straight over him. And I just worry that like he's basically a ground bound 5. And that's a cool player, and he's high feel, and there's some production stuff. There's only so high I can get on you when you're not actually doing it. And I really struggle to get over just how bad South Carolina was with a guy who was like so dominant in a very real way. And I do worry that there's like not that many paths forward for him offensively, and he's super limited defensively. And there's just too many worries for a guy who you have at 5 and who some people even had at 2 at a certain point in this cycle. He's not Draymond. He can't move like Draymond. He's not as high field as Draymond. But like, I just don't get it personally. And I have him in my first. I have him at 20. I like Colin Murray Boyles. He's a cool swing and a guy who will probably return top 20 value. But he's not a kind of player who I want to draft. And then I think if you want him to work offensively, he either has to be just a screener or be like basically forced. You have to change so much of your offense to make him work, I think, or else he's just not valuable.
Yeah, I think the sell is, and this is a little bit in contrast from when we first talked about him. I think I've come around some to, I think the sell is like driving forward, who could be unlocked a little bit by playing some more in transition. I think I've brought up Jalen Johnson with him in the past as like kind of the high end comp. I just don't buy the defense very much. That's my biggest issue. I'd still draft him in the first round. I have him at 18 on my board. But I really worry that he's just not a good enough defensive player. And that's a real concern for me. Okay. The other guys we need to talk about, and this will just kind of be based less on our boards right now. I mean, it's based on our boards, but just kind of in general, we got to talk about Ace Bailey. Stone, you remain the highest on us of us on Ace. Will you tell us why you're still in on him?
I'm practically begging you guys to talk me down from him, actually, because and it's nothing to do with this drama saga that seems to be playing out with him in his camp. This is completely just basketball related. I'm very conflicted about Ace because I think there is real shooting and real athletic tools that make me buy him defensively to be this great finisher, perimeter defender who has insane ground coverage, can make plays on the ball. And I think offensively, when there is no star outcome for me where he's at the top scorer for a team. But if he's your fourth option on a team, I think that's like a damn good fourth option if the outcome includes him being someone that is consistently created for and he's off the ball entirely. I'm conflicted with how high to rank that. Like currently he's at 7th, and he's out of anyone on my board who I have the most room for margin to move him anywhere around my board. So I'm very open to you guys trying to convince me of where I should have him as opposed to where I do.
My big problem, as like when we first talked about him, and even now, is still if you see those things, why doesn't he do them? Right? If that's your path to value, and I get it, you want to be a top 3 pick, and this is who you think you are. I struggle to have a guy that high based off of a hope that seems to have no indication of it ever coming true. There is no indication that he is leaning towards changing his play style to be this guy. There's no indicate. Every single thing is pointing to he wants to be a star. He wants to get drafted to where he can go be the guy. And I'm not sitting here like bashing him for that. If that's who he thinks he is and that's who he wants to be, then go for it. More strength to you. I don't buy that. And if what you buy is not that, then why do you ever see him doing that? There's zero indication. And I just can't get there with that level of hope, especially with a top 10 pick. So I actually have Ace at 30. Personally, I do see what you see in theory, Stone, and for the case where that happens, I'm all for it. There just aren't guys with as bad of statistical profiles as Ace who go top 10 and it works out in history. It just isn't how it works. So,
yep, I have him at 17. I'm a little bit more middle ground. I do buy the shooting, at least to some extent, though I don't think he's like a crazy elite shooter. I just don't buy any advantage creation. I do think that he's become a bit of a dog whistle for certain people, which makes me really want to root for him to succeed. Because I think the way people talk about young men sometimes is really kind of nasty and wrong. But also at a certain point, I'll say this from personal experience, personality does matter in basketball. And like, I try not to get too involved in that stuff with my draft work because I don't get to talk to these guys. But guys that do slide for personality stuff, like sometimes it's correct, right? Like just the truth. Not always, but sometimes it's correct. And they should be sliding for a reason. I think the sell here is that could this guy be Michael Porter Jr.? I think Stone likes the defense more than I do. I thought the defense was pretty bad despite some moments. I think he could be an okay like shot blocking four at times, but he's a pretty bad rebounder. I don't think he's ever going to be particularly good on the ball. I don't think there's a ton of star upside here, but as a potential like just big shot maker, like there is value in that. But I am not. I would not be moved crazy high. I like him a little bit more than Conroy Boyles, but not a ton. The next guy we should talk about, probably the next guy on Stone's board, or two guys down, I guess. Jeremiah Fears, another guy that Coop and I are really low on. I'm actually going to give the negative take first, and then I will let Stone tell us why he remains high on him. And I think his sell is fairly close to the people that are really high on him. I just think these small guards who aren't elite off the dribble shooters and aren't elite passers really, really struggle. And he is a small guard, in my opinion, even though he measured fine. Like he's a small guard. There's some stuff I like. I like the ruggedness he plays with. I think the handle is legitimately reactive. But I also think he's just too much of a predeterminer. I don't think he has great feel or proprioception. And I also think handle is something that I've just overrated in the past. Like handle is important, but like screens exist in the NBA for a reason, like, or in basketball for a reason. Like handle matters. And I think he'll probably be a good transition player in the NBA, but I just don't see like a ton of, or at least a good transition handler, but I don't think he's like some crazy space creator. I don't think he's like a crazy one-on-one handler. His handle is at its best when he has a ton of open space. And then he has some moments of like kind of funky fluidity. I like his ability to seek contact, but when you can't be the driver of great offense with the ball in your hands, but I also don't really trust you to be, like an elite scorer, it's tough for me. And I think the defense is really bad. I can only get so low on him. Like I have him at 33. I think you got to give him a full contract, even though he's a second rounder for me, because he's just so young. Production times youth is rare. And I do think that matters. And he'll probably stick in the league because of that. And there's some probably some Jordan Poole level outcomes, right? Where he just really figures out the off the dribble shooting. But I don't love the form. I don't think the form projects crazy well. I don't think his touch is great. And I don't think he reads particularly well. Like he just kind of decides, well, now it's time to shoot, instead of just being, well, this is what a shot should be. And this is, what I'm trying to create. And he's just so he just plays a kind of unserious brand of basketball, and it's kind of hard. I think and maybe it's a selfish thing. It's part of why I was lower on Harper than maybe or I am lower on Harper than maybe I should be, because nonchalance drives me crazy. I like basketball players that like play hard and run around and act like they care and are playing hard. Like even Ace Bailey, for his faults, like has moments where he will do that. Fears like never seems to me like he really actually gives a shit about what's going on the floor. And that's not just, again, that's not really anything like about his personality. I'm sure he's a super hard worker. You have to be a 6'4" lottery pick or a 6'3" lottery pick or whatever. You have to be a super hard worker. But the margins here are way, way smaller than people think. I think there's a lot of Killian Hayes in him. But even Killian Hayes was more disciplined and, I think was just a better passer. Fears is just, I think people get fooled by guards all the time because guards are the easiest type of player to love because the skill level is so high. But that also is because there's so many fucking guards in the world. The thresholds are just so high. So I'm not out on Fears, but I would not draft him anywhere near where people are talking about him. Stone, what's the sell for why he should be in that lottery range?
Yeah, I think you've convinced me to move Ace down and move Fears up because I really just wanted to see Cooper's reaction to that.
You're actually a rage baiting pro. We've been doing this pod for so long. You're driving me bananas.
No, because I think with Fears, I actually do buy a star bet with him in a way I don't with Ace. Like I think he leading a good team in scoring in the SEC with the level of offensive burden that he had and being just like an insane advantage creator. I think the handle and burst are both really good. I think this is really a bet on star outcomes because of the age development. Like if Fears was 20, he wouldn't be top 20 for me. But I think the outcomes exist for him because of the age that he's at. Like I think there's you don't find players with this level of threshold that come into the league that did what he did in college with the level of handle and burst that he has as a lead initiator. And I think for me, like the star outcomes just exist with him. Like I think it's going to take development. It's going to be a rough year or two. But I think that there's a lot of equity there to bet on where he's, a top scorer for a team who can run a team sufficiently and be this just insane advantage creating and get to the paint whenever he wants. Like if you can collapse a defense all the time in a way like I really liked Collier last year, like I think there's just a lot of equity there, especially at this age. Like these guys just don't come around often. There's not a lot of guards with the production that he has that do what they want on the court, even if a lot of the decision making has a ways to go still. Like I don't know. I think this is a star bet that is worth taking lottery despite the flaws. So I guess for me, it's Trey Johnson that I'm way out on in relation to consensus. And for you guys, it's Fears. So that's the flip-flop of the lottery guys in there.
My big question, Stone, for you with Fears. As the local decision-making obsessed person on the pod who is so far out on Trayor for his decision-making, how do you rationalize that with Fears? Because honestly, in my opinion, I think he's a worse decision-maker than Trayor. I think the inability to – he makes the problem – Trayor will make shitty decisions the entire game. Fears will make the same shitty decision, seeing the exact same coverage the entire game. There is zero adjustment. So that's kind of, for me, like, how do you rationalize that?
I think it's a lot easier to work through those decision-making through reps when you're able to consistently get to the paint at will whenever you want and have simple decisions open up for you when defenses collapse. Trayor, I think, is trying to.
Sorry, my thing about that, when you hit the defense in the same spot over and over again, and they can do the same thing, he doesn't get to the paint because he's so bad at decision making. He doesn't touch the paint in a real way that creates an advantage over and over again. That's my problem with him, is that in theory he's so interesting because he can do these things, but he can't actually consistently do these things because he stinks. He stinks so bad. I'm not going to say where I have him ranked. If you want to go listen to our pod on him, you can. I'm not going to talk about guys' rankings that are below like 40, but I'm very far out on Fears because I think the decision making is so far away that there's like no hope of improvement. And that's kind of my thing. I think it's so far behind. I'll stop interrupting.
So, do you have anything left to add on Fears, or should we move on?
I mean, I think I've given my rationale as to why I'm in on him, but yeah,
I do want to quickly add, just in general, like it's good that we disagree, and anyone who thinks there is like a right or wrong big board is just mistaken. And anyone who thinks like, oh, NBA teams are going to get it right, like, no, like part of the beauty of basketball is that everyone can bring their own thing to it, right? Like I've lived by a saying for a long time, like you can tell a lot about someone by how they play basketball, right? Just like there's really something to this sport where, because it's the mix of, it's a team sport where 5 guys have to exist on a floor together, but also there's a lot of individuality to it. It separates itself from other. It's not like football where, football, 2 or 3 guys get to make decisions, and everyone else, it's kind of about doing your job, and what separates you is how well you can do that job, right? That's not basketball. Like basketball, there's just generally a lot more variables on any given moment, right? So there is no solving this here, and anyone who might have a perfect board is going to have some level of luck to it too, because developmental context matters, lack of guys getting injured matters, all this stuff. So it's good that we disagree, even that we disagree a lot. And part of the point of this and the fun of this is that you are going to be very wrong sometimes. I had Tyrese Halliburton at like 18. That was stupid. That was really dumb. I overrated handle, right? But I learned a lot from that, and I've developed. And I'm going to be wrong on someone in this draft for sure, but that's part of the process of this. So we're each going to kind of talk about one more guy. They're all bigs for some reason. And then we will just kind of all say our boards, and we can kind of give quick little sells on guys that we might be higher or lower on. But Coop, I got to ask you, you have Amari Williams with a first-round grade. Tell us why.
I think there's a ton of funk there for an older player, and there's a super high floor as one of the best rebounders I've evaluated. I think there's a world where he is like a top 3 rebounder in the NBA, like as soon as like 2 years into his rookie contract. This is a guy who can run DHOs, can set hard screens, can finish, can pass. It just does everything you really want from a role player big. I think he's insane. I know he's older. I've really struggled with the age stuff this year and knowing how to value guys who are older, but a floor as an elite rebounder and pick and roll big, and a ceiling with a ton of passing stuff is too hard for me to pass up, especially because his motor is just so good, and he plays so damn hard, and he's like a legit 6'10". So if you have any pushback, Stone, you can. If not, hit us with Renault, because I
have him in the same. I have him also as a first rounder. So
yeah, I think we all do, but I think you were the highest.
I love him.
He's technically a second rounder for me, but he will be drafted in the first round for me. Stone, you have an interesting at the back end of this lottery tier goes Sorber, Queen, Newell, Malawak, Renault. That's 5 bigs to make up the end of your lottery. I just want to hear kind of in general, specifically Sorber, Newell, Renault, but just kind of in general with those 5. What makes you think that those bigs are the types of bigs that are worth swinging on in the lottery when we've seen so many of those guys kind of slip down boards? And then is there someone that you feel kind of most passionately about in that group?
Yeah. I guess I'll start kind of one by one and just go quickly here. I think with Sorber, this is a player that I think I'm still not completely convinced you can't build a defense around him with him as your anchor. Like, I think that world exists for him, and I think he's a very real post-up defender, paint defender who can be efficient enough as a scorer and just all around like kind of paint beast at times in the paint and just be ultimate cleanup guy, great rebounder. It's a throwback big, but I think there's a lot of worlds where he just does it so well that he's able to exist and maybe be like a team's second best player. Like I think for me that world exists with Sorber, and that's why I have him lottery. With Newell, it's less about that sort of outcome where I think he's just a really easy bet to fit on any team and be real value. Um, I buy him defensively more than a lot of people, I think, which is probably why I have him higher than you guys and probably a lot of people. I think that there's outcomes where he's survivable defensively on the perimeter. Like I think the mobility is pretty good. I think the help side rim protection is good. He's not going to exist as your primary rim protector, but I don't think he has to because he can space the floor really well. I really buy the shooting with him. So just as like the ultimate play finisher who can fit alongside anybody as your fourth option, I think, and provide really solid defense. And to be honest, like I wouldn't rule out some development where he's able to just be like an efficient scorer around the rim, can attack closeouts and shoot threes and be like, a 16 to 18 point per game guy at the peak of his career. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but wouldn't say it's off the table, even if it's not likely. So, and the other guy, Reynaud, which is probably higher than anybody else, at least that I've seen. I think there's a real bet that he might be like the best offensive player coming into this class outside of Flag. I think he's super polished. The touch is great. I think he can really shoot it. I think there's, outcomes where he's like the hub of an offense and is actually like running things through him. He's, I think, a really great decision maker with the ball in his hands. The passing execution isn't great. It's not elite, but I think he makes a lot of the right reads where it's not too much of a hindrance. So I'm really in on Reynaud, and even the defense I think I'm higher on. Like I think he can be, if he's able to be in a scheme in a context where he's relegated towards just the rim primarily, even if he struggles against post-ups, I think it could be an effective rim protector against drivers. So I'm pretty in on Reynaud, obviously, and I think the offense there is more special than a lot of people are giving it credit for.
No, that's all fair and interesting. All right, so now we're just kind of going to read our boards. We might give slight justifications for where we have guys throughout. I'm only going to read through my first round. You guys are more than comfortable to go as far as you want. Might talk about a couple players I'm lower on. I shouldn't say my first. I will read all the players I think are deserving of contracts. I might talk about a couple of players that I'm way lower on, names you might not hear, but everyone I will mention on my board, we have a podcast out about. There is no one that we haven't talked about on my board. So if you're really interested, seek that out and find it. At 1, in a tier of his own, Cooper Flag. At 2, in a tier of his own, Con Knipple. The next tier is 3 guys, Kasparas Yakonas, Derek Queen, Dylan Harper. I am aware that I do have 3 white guys as my top 3. It makes me very sad and depressed, and I've been trying to figure out if there was a way I could not have that, but trying to be true to myself and my board. That takes us through 5. The next tier takes us through 9. Walter Clayton Jr., Noah Asange, Trey Johnson, Rasher Fleming, specifically. The next tier is where I'm kind of like, these aren't guys I really want in the lottery. This is kind of my last first round tier, but it's, guys I wouldn't be super upset to take in the lottery. And obviously some of them will have to go in the lottery if I was drafting for every team. At 10, Johan Berenger. I know we spent time saying it this morning and I forgot Berenger. Johan Berenger. 11, Common Malawak, who we're a little lower on. I think the defensive ceiling is pretty capped because of the instincts and the movement ability, the lack of kind of top end athleticism. But I think he's going to be a great offensive big who can contribute defensively. And I think by the time he kind of gets to the prime of his career, could be a good enough defender, even if not a great one. 12, VJ Edgecomb. 13, Nick Clifford. This is a guy I'm higher on than a lot of people. I wish he was a little younger. I wish he was a little better, in terms of his finishing through contact. But overall, there's a lot I like there. 14, Adutiero. 15, Jace Richardson is a guy we're lower on. I just don't buy the point guard stuff, and I don't think he's a very good defender. But still, the scoring is very interesting. 16, Carter Bryant. I wish he could dribble, but still probably a pretty good defender at time. 17, Ace Bailey. 18, Colin Murray Boyles. Now, as we're getting into the second round for me, this tier will take us through 27. These are guys that, again, I will have to take in the first round, but they would be pretty like targets for me if I was in the second round. And obviously, I will have to take some in the first round. Noah Penda at 19, Drake Powell at 20, Alex Tui at 21, Amari Williams at 22, Liam McNeely at 23, Thomas Sorber at 24, Asa Newell 25, 26 is Will Richard from Florida, 27 Maxime Reynaud. And then the last of the guys I would give full contracts to, which only goes up to 34 for me in this draft, with the caveat that there's a couple guys that I think that could break this tier that I have to watch in the week between now and the draft. But that's Cedric Coward, Hanson Yang, Ben Saroff, Jaeger Demon, Will Riley, Jeremiah Fears, and Bogolyub Markovic. Coop, would you please read us your board?
Of course. Flag in a tier of his own at 1. If you can hear my dog in the background, just try to ignore her. She's really annoying. Derek Queen Con Knipple at 2 and 3 in my star bets tier. Kasparis Yakonas and Dylan Harper in my flawed star bets tier below them. Rasher Fleming in his own tier below. And then Trey Johnson, Noah Asange, Adutiero, and VJ Edgecomb down to 10. And then in my first round tier, I have Yohan Beringer, just to mock Bryce a little bit. I have Walter Clayton at 12, Maxime Reynaud, Nick Clifford, Thomas Sorber. And then at 69, Carter Bryant, who I was really in on at the pod. And then I realized maybe I shouldn't like wings who can't dribble or actually do anything with the ball in their hands. Not a good look. Amari Williams, 17, Kaman Malawach, 18, Asa Newell, Colin Murray Boyles, and Jace Richardson at 21. And that rounds out my first round. And then my second round, my priority second round guys, Will Richard, John Tanji, Igor Milicic, Cam Jones, Alex Tuhey, Max Shulga, Javon Small, Cedric Coward, and then Ace Bailey at 30. And I don't know if you can get the theme of that second round. It's all guys who are tough as nails. And it's all guys who have high motors and who can win in multiple ways. So that's my top 30.
Except for Ace Bailey.
Except for Ace Bailey, who it's all just like a bet on the most outlier shit ever happening. So, Stone, where are you at? Read us your board.
Okie dokie. I'll go through the guys that I view as like firmly draftable. There's 43 of them. The first pick I have, obviously, is Cooper Flag in a tier of his own. My second tier is Dylan Harper at 2 and Con Knipple at 3. My third tier is a bunch of guys with Kasparis Yakonas at 4, Colin Murray Boyles at 5, VJ Edgecomb at 6, 7 Ace Bailey for now. That's probably going to change after today's conversation. 8 Carter Bryant, 9 Jeremiah Fears, 10 Thomas Sorber, 11 Derek Queen, 12 Asa Newell, 13 Common Malawach, and 14 Maxime Reynaud, and that's my lottery tier. And there happens to actually be 14 guys that fill it out this year. Not typical. First rounders, this tier includes Nick Clifford at 15, Drake Powell at 16, Noah Penda at 17, who Cooper and Bryce convinced me evilly to not be as in on, but I still like him. I can't quit him all the way. 18, Jace Richardson, 19, Noah Asange, 20, Rasher Fleming, who I think is definitely an NBA player. I just can't get to the value level of it being worth taking higher. 21, Yohan Beringer, 22, Max Scholga, who I seem to be pretty high on in comparison to a lot of people. Bryce talked about loving guys who play hard, and Cooper did as well, so both of them should have him higher. 23, Amari Williams. 24, Walter Clayton Jr. That rounds out my first round tier. My late first / priority second rounders include Wooga Poplar at 25, Cedric Coward at 26, 27 is Rocco Zakarski, Adutiero at 28, Javon Small at 29, Trey Johnson at 30, Bogolyub Markovich, 31, Cam Jones 32, Ugo Gonzalez 33, Igor Milicic 34, 35 Will Richard. That concludes the late first / early second round picks. Firmly draftable guys that I would definitely take in the second round and give full contracts. This is my last of the draftable tiers would be Izan Almanza at 36, Alex Tui, St. Thomas at 37, Alex Tui at 38, Bryce Williams at 39, Sion James at 40, Yegor Demin at 41, Danny Wolf at 42, and Yannick Conan Niederhauser rounds out my firmly draftable tier. And there are 43 guys in total that I would give a full contract to this year.
Yeah, absolutely great stuff. For those interested in why we're lower on some common popular guys like Ryan Kalkbrenner, Danny Wolf, and Janai Broom, guys of that nature, you should listen to our podcast about it. Again, everyone discussed here, except for St. Thomas that Stone mentioned, who we will, I think, try to fit in something small on eventually, has been talked about on a podcast. So find it. We think we did great work. We appreciate you all for listening. For Stone at Report _Court, for Coop at Ali _Roop _Coop. Let us know what you think of our boards. Let us see your boards. Even though I will hate looking at them. Because that's what I do. I hate big boards. This has been the Upside Swings NBA Draft Show. We hope we hit our ceiling. Thank you.